So this is the Sky This Month, covering the period from tonight to the next meeting on November 15th. Essentially, I'm going to cover a little bit about space exploration news and review a bit of this month in history, and then we'll get into observing and noting that for those who use the Observer's Handbook, that the time difference from the universal time listed in the Observer's Handbook will transition during this period with the end of daylight savings time. We'll come to talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to talk about what's up with the sun and the moon, where the planets are, what they're doing. We've got some comets to mention tonight, asteroids, some satellite phenomena, and we've got some occultations, both asteroidal and lunar occultations, to cover up tonight. And then I'll get into a few recommendations for some autumn targets. And I've already posted the contents of the information, contents of the presentation on the website at riscto.ca, so you can find it there. All right, so in case you're feeling drowsy and you want to doze off after the first couple of slides, I'll just give you the highlights to start off. So first of all, yay, hooray, we've got more than 10 hours of complete darkness setting in now. We have to pay for that with a bit of cold weather, but we'll manage. There's a new comet to look at, Comet Assassin. I'll cover that in a bit more. October 15th, we've got an occultation of Regulus by the moon. Then we've got morning Zodiacal Light, which we can keep an eye out for this month. Uranus hits opposition. We've got Orionids peaking during a dark moonless period, which is great. Then we've got a couple of asteroidal occultations visible right over the Toronto center. We've got another star occultation by the moon on November 5th. And then the other occultation. And then a little bonus is Venus and Jupiter sitting only a quarter of a degree apart on November 13th. So I listed a bunch of the upcoming rocket launches and highlighted just one or two of them. So we have this, I always am intrigued by these classified launches by the U.S. Naval Reconnaissance Office, so we can imagine what they're sending up. We have cargo launches to the ISS here on the 12th. And most of these are broadcast online. You can watch. And then a couple of other really cool, interesting things. There's some more cargo launches. And then we have this, sometime in the fourth quarter, this Rocket Lab electron rocket from Mahia Peninsula in New Zealand. So they've started a rocket company down in New Zealand, and they're doing their second orbital test flight from their facility on the North Island in New Zealand. So that's kind of a new player in the rocket business. And then somewhere in the next little while, keep your eye out for SpaceX's launch of their Falcon Heavy. That's 3 Falcon 9 rockets plus 27 Merlin engines. So that's quite the rocket when that goes up. Not too much on space missions this month. Of course, we lost Cassini recently, but Juno was still doing its thing around Jupiter in its 53-day science orbits. And this was a really interesting mosaic that was published recently from a JunoCam image series taken on September 1st. And it covers 95 minutes as the spacecraft swept from the Jupiter South Pole around to its North Pole through Perijove and then off. And I couldn't fit all the images in one slide, so we're going to do it in 3 sections. So this is the first section of the passes. Then we get into the more closer up to the planet. They're now calling this area this blue or indigo zone that they're keeping an eye on. That's quite fascinating. And then it starts, so sort of Jupiter starts reducing in size as the spacecraft starts pulling away. And there's a couple more frames as they go off to the North Pole. So if you want to see that in higher resolution, you can just go on the website and pick that up. Take a good look at it. So this month in history, just looking back, in 1758, we have the birthday of Heinrich Olbers, who was actually hunting for new planets in the area between Mars and Jupiter. And luckily enough, he found asteroid Pallas, the second asteroid discovered. And then a while later, he picked up number 4, Vesta. And then in 1632, we have the birthday of Christopher Wren, English architect and astronomer. 1877, we all know this name, Henry Norris Russell, American astronomer, co-developer with Hertzsprung of the famous Hertzsprung-Russell diagram showing the relationship between star temperature and luminosity. 1656, another well-known name in astronomy, Edmund Halley, English astronomer and mathematician. Of course, he for whom the comet is named. And then in 1932, Ben Bova. And if you like science fiction and if you like science, he's one to read. He does a lot of hard sci-fi, especially around exploring the planets of the solar system. In 1934, Carl Sagan, American astronomer, planetary scientist, author, evangelist, maybe Martian, who knows? 1924, Audouin Dollfus, French astronomer and aeronaut, discovered Saturn's moon Janus while the rings were at a minimum, which would let these inner moons be visible near the planet. And then in 1709, Dirk Klinkenberg discovered the six-tailed comet, the Great Comet of 1744. And if you do a little research online, you can see a number of engravings and etchings showing sort of the way the comet appeared to people with its multiple tails. In astronomy history, back in 1884, Greenwich was established as the universal time standard. And then in 1997, of course, SNIF, Cassini, it was launched on October 5th, starting that terrific mission. In 1967, Venera 4 landed on Venus. The capsule was designed to float, just in case they landed on liquids. They weren't sure what they were going to get. I even read somewhere that they had some parts of the mechanism that were made out of sugar so that they could dissolve, and it could sort of transform into a different style of exploration. So that's something you could sort of look into if you're interested. And then in 1897, the Yerkes Observatory is founded there with its big refractor. In 1917, the Mount Wilson 100-inch telescope saw its first light. And then in 1957, we've got Sputnik 2 launched with Laika aboard, a little tier, another tier for Laika. And then in 1967, we have Surveyor 6 launched, landing on the moon a few days later. And in 1967, the very first Saturn V rocket was launched, the uncrewed Apollo 4. In 1572, we have Tycho Brahe observing the supernova of 1572. And here's this diagram that he drew. This is, I think, Cassiopeia. It's in Cassiopeia. And this is the Nova Stella, the new star that he noted in his chart, item number I. Much later, we imaged it again. And here is a WISE infrared space telescope image of the area. And this is the supernova today in infrared. All right, moving on to observing. So a few of the star parties that we have coming up. So the REC Toronto Centre Dark Sky Observing is going to be held this time at Glen Major Forest. We're going to give that a try. It's a bit closer, a bit more wide open sky, a bit more room in the parking lot for more people. So I hope those who may have not wanted to travel quite as far as Long Sault will give Glen Major a try. The window opens on next week on October 16th. First clear weeknight of the week. Then back in town on the week of the October 23rd, so the first clear evening of the week of October 23rd from Monday to Thursday, we're at Bayview Village Park.
Where's Glen Major?
Glen Major, the map to Glen Major is on the back of every issue of Scope, the back page. So it's in southern Uxbridge, North Pickering, kind of north of Ajax. Our solar observing session is coming up this weekend. Hopefully it'll be sunny for us, and if not, we have our backup date of October 21st. And then this talk covers the next interval, so the next scheduled solar observing session would be November 4th. And for that, we look to Sean here, who will give the no-go for that event. And for those who want to travel, the Jasper Dark Sky Festival is on, currently underway, or soon to be underway. And then there's a lot of other star parties on throughout the USA, if anybody wants to go a little farther away. Okay, citizen science. So the Globe at Night program is an event, is an exercise where regular people are asked to look at their night sky and gauge how bad light pollution might be for them. So essentially what you do during the reporting period is visually observe the magnitude of the stars that you can get to at your location. And the focus for October will be the constellation of Cygnus, and the focus for November will be Pegasus. And these are just an example of the charts they provide for you to sort of compare with what you see with what magnitudes you can reach visually. And if you can pick it out here, it gets a little busy by the end, but here's the summer triangle. So you've got your Deneb, Vega, Altair, and Cygnus is sort of running down the middle. That's sort of Albireo kind of in the middle there. So there's Cygnus. And again, you can go to the website. You can look for historical information and more instructions on how to take part. Main thing to point out regarding the sun is that daylight savings time ends on November 5th. So as I said, your universal time minus 5 hours resumed for those using the Observer's Handbook. Astronomical twilight. So astronomers really like it when the sky is very, very dark. An astronomical twilight is defined as the point where the sun has set more than 18 degrees below the horizon. So under ideal conditions, you could almost not be able to distinguish between the sky and the ground. It would be that dark. And that's the period of time where we like to do our imaging of deep sky objects when we have very little sky glow. So astronomical twilight actually ends tonight at 8:15 p.m. and picks up again at 5:53 in the morning when the dawn begins to break soon after that. So that gives us about 9.5 hours of imaging time. But the good news is that a month from now, the amount of imaging time jumps over 11 hours, and that's about an increase of about 2.5 minutes a day. Apogee and perigee times for the moon, and here's what we want to know about is when the moon's in the sky. So these are the various phases coming up. So we have last quarter on the 12th, and then we have the all-important new moon on Thursday, October 19th, followed by the first quarter on the 27th, and then the next full moon, which is the frost moon or the beaver moon, happens in early November on the 4th. And just to mention that there is an International Observe the Moon Night event, which is coordinated events worldwide on October 28th. For those interested in seeing every last bit of detail or wring every last bit of goodness out of the moon that they want, you can take advantage of libration, which is the wobble of the moon due to the particulars of its orbit. And this information is in the Observer's Handbook every month if you want to go looking for it for yourself. But essentially, these are the times when you can see most of the eastern or western limbs or most of the features at the top, northern limb or the bottom limb, by just looking at the angle that the moon is sort of tilted left, right, or up and down. And these are the dates when you can get those extra looks, see those extra features that are on the edges of your moon charts. Okay. Between the next new moon and about the period 2 weeks after the next, between the new moon and the next full moon, is the optimal time for looking at zodiacal light in the morning sky in the east. And the zodiacal light is the glow produced by interplanetary particles in the plane of the solar system that is scattering sunlight. And it's sort of, the sun is down here and it's illuminating all this material. And so just before dawn, for maybe half an hour, you can look for this wedge of light that sort of flanks the ecliptic, which is this line here, and look for this glow of the zodiacal light. Not to be mistaken for the Milky Way, which is further to the south here. So what's with the planets this next 4 weeks? Well, right now, as we know, we've got Venus and Mars in the pre-dawn sky. So this would be the pre-dawn sky. Jupiter is getting close to solar conjunction, so it's out of the picture for a little while before it rejoins the morning sky. I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Then in the early evening sky, we're going to get Mercury coming up in the next little bit. Saturn is now drifting into the sort of getting towards the evening twilight, so it's getting past its prime. And then kind of in the middle of the night, which is sort of the center of the diagram here, we've got Uranus and Neptune, which are more or less all-night targets. And I'll cover a few more details on that in a minute. So Mercury, what's Mercury doing? Well, it's for the month of November, it's going to basically give us a very poor evening apparition. So the problem with this is that the ecliptic is rather steep in the evening, and then Mercury is already also sitting below the ecliptic. So it's not going to rise very high in the sky at all. And in fact, it's going to sort of do a shuffle sideways for most of the month. But if you want to give it a try, that's where it will be. If you do get a telescope on it, you'll notice that its disk is growing in diameter and waning in phase as it goes. Venus, as I said, it's in the pre-dawn sky. It's been steadily dropping sunwards for quite some time. In a telescope, it shows nearly a full phase. As it's heading downwards over the next 3 or 4 weeks, it's going to pass a number of objects. So it'll pass Porrima, double star Porrima on the 22nd. Then it'll drop down and pass Spica on November 2nd and 3rd. And then, as I mentioned, very close to Jupiter on the 13th. I'll give you a diagram of that in a minute. Mars, in the meantime, is in the same neck of the woods. It's sort of climbing up, being carried upwards by the motion of the sky. And it's in the eastern pre-dawn sky, so its disk is slowly growing and slowly brightening. It's still quite some distance from us. On the 17th, we're looking for the old crescent moon to be sitting only about 1 degree to its left. And then when the moon does its cycle a month later, it comes back and passes it on the left again, but not as close. Okay, here's what I was talking about. So Jupiter is in the eastern pre-dawn sky after its conjunction on October 26th, and then it'll be moving prograde from Virgo into Libra on the 15th. But on the 13th, so Venus is descending, Jupiter is rising, and on that morning, they'll both be within 0.25 degrees of each other. So this is a 30 arc minute circle. So you imagine if your telescope eyepiece sets up about a half a degree or about a full moon diameter field of view, then you'll get Venus and Jupiter and its moons at the same time. So that's interesting. But what's more is that both of these planets being very, very bright, they'd be a great thing to chase during the daytime later that day, to see if you can pick them out in the daytime. So that would be something to put on your calendar to think to try. Saturn, as I said, is in the sort of southwestern evening sky. It's we've still got some good views of it for us now, but it's certainly starting to show the signs of it leaving town. But right now it's in Ophiuchus, and it's setting about 9:50. But an hour from now it'll be setting about 6:50 p.m. On the 23rd of October, we have the young crescent moon sitting about 7 degrees away. And of course, the next night, the moon will hop and sit sort of here. So you've got sort of 2 nights where you've got the pair in view. Uranus. So Uranus is magnitude 5.7, so it's certainly within view of binoculars in a dark sky and certainly a telescope. So it's going to reach opposition on October 19th. So that's the day of the year when we're closest to it. And it's slightly brighter and slightly larger than it is at any other day. It will be observable all night because it's rising as the sun sets on that date. And that sets us up to view it pretty much as an all-night object for the entire month. For aid in finding it, see if you can see this naked eye star Omicron Piscium, which is only just 2 degrees below Uranus. And it's not moving much at all, so it'll be sort of in the neighborhood of that star for quite some time yet. Neptune is dimmer, magnitude 7.85. It's in Aquarius until November 22nd, when then it reverses direction and starts prograde again. And it's basically observable as soon as it's fully dark until about a few hours after midnight, sort of maybe 3 o'clock a.m. Now, and then maybe 12:30 a.m. by the time of our next meeting. And it also has a little marker star you can use, this dimmer star, but it's Lambda Aquarii, or otherwise known as Hydor, and it's just a half a degree above Neptune. And then October 30th, watch for the moon to be sitting about 2 degrees from Neptune. It's not going to be a very good view with the bright moon next to the dim little planet, but they certainly are in the same area. Another one, minor planet asteroid Pallas, which I mentioned in the history section, is sitting at magnitude 8.2. Unfortunately, it's well below the ecliptic. Here's the ecliptic way up here in the southern sky, but it is moving southwest through Eridanus this month, and it reaches opposition on October 29th when it's 1.695 AUs from us. So it's something you might want to try for. I like looking at what's happening with minor planets. So the Minor Planets Center keeps tabs on everything that's discovered. And so between January 1st and today, another 1,338 near-Earth asteroids have been detected just this year. The near-Earth asteroids in this cartoon are the red dots. So here's Earth in its orbit, and these are all the red dots, which of course have been added to considerably, at a rate of about 157 every month. The minor planets, which are the green ones, 20,435 extra ones, or new ones this year alone, at a rate of about 2,405 a month. And of course, much of that is done with robotic observatories, robotic telescope, and camera systems. Another 39 new comets this year, including one I'm going to mention in a minute, and that's at a rate of about 5 a month. And that's based, all of this is based on about 13 million observations just since January 1st. So we're definitely wanting to keep tabs of all these objects in our sky. Okay, so here's the new comet I was talking about, Comet Assassin. And it was discovered in July of this year. And there's an image that was taken by Eric Brisnick in Belgium. And Assassin stands for the All-Sky Automated Survey for Supernovae. So I thought that was pretty cool. Right now it's a circumpolar comet, observable with large apertures and or dark skies, about magnitude 8. And the projections for its brightness curve are that it will brighten a little bit more, but maybe not a lot more. Just to give you an idea where it is, so here's Polaris, and here's the path of the comet over the next 4 weeks, and it's going to pass extremely close to Alpha Camelopardalis, this star here, on October 28th. So that might be an interesting little view. Meteor showers. So we have several meteor showers that are underway. The Orionids started on September 23rd. And this is a, if you ever go to the AMS Meteor webpage, during the active meteors, the periods of each meteor shower's active period, they generate these animated graphical displays that are in three-dimensionally rendered the solar system and the path of the debris train. So this is basically showing the orbits of all the inner planets, and you can see how the debris from the comet that has left the Orionid meteor shower debris is at an oblique angle to the plane of the solar system. And of course, and on an annual basis, then Earth will, here's Earth, will cross through the stream of debris and produce the meteor shower. So the Orionids are going to peak around the 21st of October at a peak rate of about 10 to 20 meteors per hour viewed at the zenith. These are pretty fast meteors. The debris was left by Comet Halley. The moon will be just past new at the peak, so that should make for good viewing. The Orionid meteor shower is the radiant for it. Of course, you can look anywhere in the sky for the meteors, but you can tell they're Orionids if they're traveling away from the radiant, which is sort of in the club of Orion, sort of sitting between the top of Orion and the feet of Gemini. So here's Orion. You can see his belt. There's his sword. There's the Orion Nebula. And here are the meteors sort of radiating away in this long exposure photograph. The northern Taurid shower is also underway. So this one will peak overnight around November 11 or 12 at a week rate of only about 5 meteors per hour. These ones are medium speed meteors. They're left by a periodic comet Encke, and they consist of larger grains which generally favor producing colorful fireballs. So they're few, but they are maybe more spectacular. And near the peak, the moon will be about 34% illuminated and rising after midnight, which is sort of prime meteor time. So you may want to do your meteor looking or meteor hunting in the evening around the peak period. And the radiant point for the northern Taurids is in Taurus, near the Pleiades. There's the Pleiades there, and you'll be able to see that they're radiating in a direction away from the Pleiades area. And the Leonids. The Leonids are going to start up early in November, and they won't peak overnight until after the next meeting, but there's no reason we can't keep an eye out for some. These are derived from Comet Tempel-Tuttle, and these ones are typically fast and bright, with many having persistent trains. The nice thing about this one is that the peak is going to happen when the moon is a new moon, which gives us a nice dark sky for meteor hunting. And the radiant for these is in the sickle of Leo, and that's sort of in the eastern sky, in eastern pre-dawn sky. For those looking for space station passes, Right now we have a series of evening passes that last until the 18th, mostly between 7:15 and 9:15 p.m. And then there's a gap, and then a morning series commences on October 28th, with most of those between 4:30 and 6 a.m. There's a few fairly nice ones coming up over the next week or two, so I've listed them here, and they're also in the PDF that I've already posted to the website. For those that want to see iridium flares, then please look for iridium flares sooner than later, because they're starting to deorbit the satellites that are producing these flares and replace them with satellites that don't have flares. And so the iridium flares nowadays are happening mostly between about 6:45 and 8:30 p.m. and in the mornings from 7 a.m. to 7:45. So get your iridium flares while you can. If you want to know how to see them, you can go on to heavensabove.com and enter your location. And then you can also get smartphone and tablet apps. And I usually list them, or always list them, in my weekly Skylight email, or post them on Tumblr if you want to get what's up for this week. So occultations, we've got some cool stuff to talk about. So on October 25th at 5:30 in the morning, we have a rank 100, which means a very high confidence asteroidal occultation of this asteroid Ate, or I don't think it's 8, it must be Ate, occulting the star. And this is the predicted track that passes right through Kitchener. And then the 1 standard deviation uncertainty would be the blue lines here, which certainly encompasses Markham, Toronto, and the Hamilton. So the Golden Horseshoe area are all within a good sight of looking for that asteroidal occultation. And that's going to be a small dip, 0.65 magnitudes for 13 seconds, nice and high, 73 degrees above the horizon for the star. And then on November 11th at 8:30 in the evening, a very convenient, pleasant time, we have asteroid Messalina occulting another star. That's going to dip 3 magnitudes for 6 seconds at an altitude of 58 degrees. And again, here we have our track running through Lindsay and Aurora area down through Guelph and Kitchener, and our confidence limits encompass our whole GTA area. So no reason not to go and check those out unless it's cloudy. So that's what we have to hope for, that it's clear. In terms of lunar occultations, so on October 15th, we have an occultation of Regulus that happens in the morning, so that will ingress behind the leading lit edge of the moon about 5:47 in the morning, and then about an hour later, Regulus will reappear from the dark edge of the moon at about 6:34 a.m. If you're wanting to watch these events happen, unless you're very confident on where the star will emerge from the moon, then it's better not to use too high a power in your telescope, so that you can encompass more of the moon's edge and then see the object reappear. Then there's a second one that happens on November 5th. In this case, it's the star Aldebaran. And this is just the screen track, is just the moon's orbit. So it shows the moon is going to pass through the triangular face of Taurus, which is the Hyades cluster, and then eventually hit Aldebaran. For us, about 8:05 p.m. and then egressing. So it's nearly a full moon. It'll egress from the dark limb at about 9 p.m. So astronomers always want their clearest views of the objects they're looking at, and the best way to do that is to wait until they're the highest that they can be in the sky. And the objects that are rising and then traversing the sky and setting always reach their maximum height when they cross the meridian, which is due south. And so we like to know what's happening on the meridian, sort of for planning our observing programs. But even more than that, you want to look through the least amount of air you can, so the best thing to do is to look nearly straight up, because the lower in the sky the object is, the more air blanket you're looking through. And this circle I've drawn here represents between 1 air mass, which is the sort of minimum, down to 1.5 times that. By the time you get down into here, you're getting 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 air masses. So it makes the objects twinkle more and extincts them, makes them somewhat dimmer again. So you want to focus on objects that are sort of very high near the zenith. So around 8 p.m. on October 20th, which is the next new moon area, new moon time, the objects that are sort of on the constellations on the meridian would be Capricornus, Aquila, Western Aquarius, Aquilius. Aquilius is the cute little one, little baby horse that sits beside Pegasus. Delphinus, Sagitta, Vulpecula, Cygnus, Cepheus, and Eastern Draco. And then 2 hours later at 10 p.m., we pick up Pisces Austrinus. Again, it's not optimal for mid-northern observers because it's so low in the sky, lots of air mass. But I mean, if that's your only time to see these objects, you make the best of it. So Pisces Austrinus, then we get into Aquarius, we get Western Pisces, Pegasus, Little Lacerta the Lizard, and Cepheus. And then 2 hours later, we pick up Sculptor, again, really low in the south, Western Cetus, Pisces, Eastern Pegasus, and Andromeda, Cassiopeia, and Cepheus. And finally at 2 a.m., we pick up Fornax, a bit of Eridanus here, the rest of Cetus, and then we get into Aries, Triangulum, Andromeda, Perseus, Cassiopeia, and Camelopardalis. All right, so what should you look at these days? Well, it's a great time for observing because the bugs are gone, the air is cool, it gets dark nice and early, but maybe you're tired of the same old Messier objects. So why not try Caldwells? So Caldwells include many of the objects that you're already familiar with. And what are the Caldwells? Well, we all know that Messier's catalog is around 109 objects that are visible from the deep sky catalog, viewed visible from Paris, where Messier did his work. Sir Patrick Moore of the UK thought that Messier missed a lot of good stuff, and so he decided to create another 109 targets that are not Messier's, that are sort of the best of the sky that Messier missed, but he decided to include the entire sky, northern and southern hemisphere. So if you set out to see all the Caldwell objects, 109 of them, you have to plan a trip to the southern hemisphere at some point to pick them up. And luckily enough, when I was in OSCAI with Ian and Tony and Phil and the rest, I decided to start at 109 and work down. And I got about 40 of them done from the southern hemisphere. So I'm actually in pretty good shape to pick them up. But I'll just cover a few things that you might pick up. So this is Stellarium. You can configure Stellarium to show you only certain classes of deep sky objects or certain catalogs. And this is showing just the Caldwell objects. So here we have the northeastern sky around the new moon at 10 p.m. And we've got a few things you can try for. So here's the cat's eye. Again, your mileage may vary depending on your telescope. The cat's eye's up here in Draco. Then we've got the fireworks galaxy down here at Caldwell 7. And again, this is going to rise through the night, so don't worry about it being so low at the moment. Then we have the ET cluster, or otherwise known as the Owl cluster or the Dragonfly cluster. It sits here in the, if you make a 90 degree in here with Cassiopeia, C13 sits right there. The double cluster has one of the Caldwells. It's Caldwell 14, so it's sitting right here. And then we've got the blinking planetary, which is Caldwell 15. It's sitting up here in Cygnus. And the North American nebula is Caldwell 20. It sits up here just below Deneb, Emission Nebula. Then you've got Caldwell 22, the blue snowball, another planetary nebula. And these objects are great using oxygen 3 filters or ultra-high contrast filters to boost their light. This is cool. This is the Outer Limits galaxy. It's Caldwell 23. It sits here in the bottom end of Andromeda. And then we've got the Veil Nebula up at the bottom lower wing of Cygnus, Caldwell 33 and 34. And where did we miss one? Yeah, there we go. And a couple more. The Hyades itself is a Caldwell object. It's Caldwell 41, so it's the face of Taurus the Bull. And finally, we've got the mini Sombrero galaxy, which is Caldwell 43. It sits down here in the bottom part of, upper part of Pisces, in the bottom part of Pegasus. And the Propeller galaxy, Caldwell 44. And this is one that inspired us to do some of our dark sky observing and our peculiar galaxy observing when we were in on the eclipse trip, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So that's Caldwell 44. It's there, sitting right there in Pegasus. So those are some, hopefully those are some ideas of things you might not have looked at before. Whoops. And that's it, except for Comet Assassin and Comet Pan-STARRS by the Pleiades. Thanks. Any questions? No?
How far away are you going to be looking from the source?
Well, the Earth is plowing, the Earth is being carried into the debris field like it's like bugs on a windshield. So they're hitting the Earth's atmosphere as we hit the cloud and burning up in all directions. So we're traveling through the source. We're going to be enveloped by it. But really the only meteors we get are the ones on our prow of our boat or the windshield of our car as we head through them. So that's why we recommend certain times and dates to look, because that's the point where we're really plowing straight into them the most. Yeah. That's it. All right, thanks. So